Good afternoon, everybody. It's my great pleasure and honor to be with you to this webinar, and I would like to express my sincere thanks to the organizer for this kind invitation. As already has been said, I am the president of the Cyprus National Committee. We are a scientific committee, and we try to protect children not only from the proven but also for well-documented emerging toxic factors, including the radiation. And our approach is based on the evidence and the precautionary principle. So after those very important presentations from my colleague, I would like to add to this complicated puzzle of the effects of the digital technology. And I think digital technology should be considered as a two-sided coin. The one is related to the exposure of radiation from those devices, and the other is the non-rational use of devices and application used by the children. So we have to address both those two issues, and perhaps, and there is no research enough research on that we find also interaction and synergies between those two. So just as an introduction, I would like to remind you that our entire body is based on chemical and electromagnetic signal, well synchronized and communicate internally and function. This can be possibly interact with and disrupted by external sources of electromagnetic radiation, provided that we have the right antennas to do so. And the answer is yes, we have our DNA, which because of its structure is functioning as a fractal antenna that means that is sensitive to a variety of frequencies. And as I said, or as it has been said already, this is a controversial area where we have part of the scientific community and part of the authorities, unfortunately, claiming that there are no biological effects, but there are only thermal effects due to this radiation. But the truth is that although we don't have a definite proof of the harm, we have a lot of evidence of non-thermal biological effect, which is growing, and we have overall 79% of peer-reviewed experimental, animal, and epidemiological studies show and confirm effects. On the other hand, the safety of the technology has been never proved. And in addition, we have also plausible mechanisms which has been identified of action of this radiation on our body. One of the most important being the voltage-gated calcium channels mechanism. And I would say, unfortunately, it's not shown the whole, I don't know why, the whole picture. But anyway, I will concentrate on some biological effects which are considered particularly important for the children. And this is, first of all, developmental neurotoxicity, which includes both neurophysiological and neurodegeneration effects. That means effects on brain, chemistry, structure and function, cognition and behavioral problems. Destruction of myelin, which is very, very important for maintaining the proper functioning and protection of the nervous system. Potential increase in the perfusion of blood barrier, which is very important for the children to be protected from other toxic chemicals. And we have, in addition, effects on the immune system, on reproductive disorders, on cancer, and weakening of antioxidant and repairing mechanisms, which again, in most of the cases, are not so well developed in childhood. And I think we all agree that the most important issue here at stake is the brain, because development of brain starts within 4 weeks of conception and continues. And the most important is that by the age of 5, it reaches 90% of its development. So it is very important to be protected during this period. And of course, we know that genetic factors will determine originally the architecture of the brain and the mental legacy for the child. But to what extent this legacy is being utilized and developed, it is dependent on many factors, including and especially the toxic one, which will determine this utilization at the end. And unfortunately, we face this pandemic of environmental behavior and intelligent processes on the children. Nowadays, in 1 to 6 children aged between 2 and 8 years has a mental, behavior, or developmental disorder. And this is very alarming. That is something we have to do on this to prevent this pandemic to continue. And of course, there are many factors, including social ones and environmental, and many neurotoxic chemicals which can cause those effects. I have to add here that ERF-MF is a proven neurotoxic by 70% of the studies. And the most important thing, determining factor, is the exposure, which is continuous and universal up to 24 hours per day. No other toxic factor is exposing our children to such a continuous manner. And why we focus on children? Because as it is admitted by WHO, fetuses and child have unique windows of vulnerability not found in adults. Timing of exposure then becomes the determinant factor of toxic effect. And compared with adults, it's well known that they have higher exposure and weaker defense mechanisms. And in 2014, WHO admits that we don't know yet all the effects, but the impact of EMF-RF on fetuses and children might be higher. I don't know how much this is considered by WHO nowadays. But I want to refer to 3 factors which are more relevant to the RF EMF exposure. First of all, the embryonic stem cell density in child is higher. And these stem cells are particularly affected by RF EMF, and their adaptation to chronic exposure is very difficult. Second point is that children are more sensitive to any epigenetic changes in DNA which are caused by this radiation. And these changes could affect child's development, in particular the neurological one. And the brain development, as already have been said, is very sensitive to stimulus caused by radiation and screen applications. And as I said, they have greater exposure because radiation is penetrated deeper in their scalp. They have higher dielectric constant, greater conductivity because simple in their brain, they have more liquid, so they have greater conductivity. And this is very, this review of is very important by Morgan, where it is working on this. In this picture, it's shown how is compared, I would say, the penetration of radiation in the scalp of a small child, 5 years old, and then 10 years, and then adult. If we compare the 2 pictures of 5 and adult, we can easily see how much that the penetration is higher and the intensity of radiation is higher. And this is stated very clearly in the year of 2011 that in comparison with adults, the absorption in the brain tissue is 2 times higher and up to 10 times higher in marrow bone. And later on, we have other references and research showing that we have 5 times more in the eyes and 30 times more in the hippocampus, which is quite important, very important organ for cognitive functions and development. And the problem again here is the multiple and intermittent and continuous exposure of the children, which is exponentially grown with the emerging technology of 5G and IoT. And this exposure starts and continues through vulnerable stages of embryo and adolescence. Here I would like to split to show you some kind of exposure of the children. In the purple cycle, you can see the so-called passive exposure, which is caused by the mother or because of the baby monitor, which is put next to the head. It is wireless and put next to the head of the baby. And in the red circle, we can see the active exposure, to where we as a parents force our children to be by giving all those devices to the children, which is a big problem of our day. And in the corner, you can see Wi-Fi, which is we have both circles, the red one and the purple, because we can have passive and active exposure. And there is a bit about Wi-Fi, because the energy which is emitted is relatively lower than the one from 4G and 5G. That this is true. But the true, on the other hand, is that Wi-Fi has pulses and peaks of very high intensity, which determines, in fact, the bioactivity of the radiation. And the second point is that the exposure duration can be very long, lasting some hours up to 24 hours per day. And now we have a lot of review where we see how Wi-Fi depletes the antioxidant, creates pro-oxidative stress that damage DNA, cell structure, membranes, and more. And a very recent review of 100 studies come from Germany for weekly, which you can easily see that every function, almost every function of our body can be affected. And the first reaction against Wi-Fi comes from the Council of Europe, where in 2011 already advised that particularly schools give preference should be given to wired internet connections and strictly regulate the use of mobile phones by school children. Then we have a lot of appeals and declaration, including our declaration in Nicosia, Medical Scientific Association, in Europe, in Australia, in United States, all are alarming advices regarding the wireless technology. And as I said from the beginning, that we have controversial opinion about the effects, but we already experience short-term effects on our children, like insomnia, sleeping disorder, headache, nervousness, ear ringing, digitalized brain, computer vision syndrome, baby crying in the middle of the night without reason, probably because it has a wireless baby monitor, attention deficit, learning difficulties, unexplained changes in school performance, pains at multiple body sites, and finally, the addiction to games, which is declared by WHO already in 2018. So I now like to embark to the second side of the problem, which is the non-rational use of devices and application by children. And I would like to add also my views on this issue. First of all, our concern is about the using of those devices by the infants, small kids and toddlers. And those applications and devices have never been tested for what they can cause on the long term, especially on those small kids. And the brain development is at risk. And what is evidence for 40 years brain research it is clear that a child's brain must initially organize itself in an analog fashion. Once this foundation has been established, digital workplace will be easily accessible to young adults. And there is no healthy development without movement and play. According to Professor Petruk Tusset, it says, and according to the contemporary neuroscience finding, digital media not only impair the mental development of children, but also their physical abilities such as balance and the meaningful management of emotion. It is absolutely essential for children to gain diverse experience through playful, physical, and social interaction with the others. This experience are stored in the brain and gradually led to the reasoning and maturity, and teach children how to overcome inhibition, how to build courage, develop spatial awareness, and experience a sense of accomplishment. Simply swiping a figure across a smartphone screen hinders or distorts the brain development because simply much of what is observed is only superficially understood and is sufficiently retained in the brain. Digital media cause overstimulation. Overstimulation is caused also by radiation, and not only impair the mental development of children, but also their physical ability, such as balance and meaningful management of the emotion. And Professor Kutter is very straightforward on this. And the use of tablets, the concerns by these small kids, concerns are about underdevelopment, especially of the self-control. I have to remind you that this self-control ability starts from the third year of the kid's development. There are concerns about communication, about self-regulation, empathy, and the ability to peer-solving problems. And we have research showing that later in their lives, those kids are faced problems in developing mathematical and science skills. It is clear that children need firm roots in reality before being exposed to virtuality. And we have the clear position from American Academy of Pediatrics, which says that before the age of 2, children require exploring and contact with the real world and not the artificial world of multimedia. And because of their immature symbolic memory and attentional skills, infants and toddlers experience the so-called video deficit. In other words, they cannot transfer the knowledge from the two-dimensional platform to the three-dimensional real world. And last but not least, raise the issue and alarm that we should never use those devices to calm our children, because this eventually will limit the ability of the children to develop their own emotion regulation. And we have very recently the position of the Spanish Pediatric Association in 24 December, where, among others, the range below which children should not be exposed to screen increases from 2 to 6 years old. It finds a strong association between the time parents spend in front of screens and that of their children. It is corroborated that the excessive use of screen harms areas such as sleep, cardiovascular system, brain volume, dieting, and many others. Urges for measures from both governments and the education system to avoid the potential harmful effect on health and development of children and adolescents. There's a clear evidence regarding the smartphones. We have already heard a lot from previous speakers. It is clear that restricts intelligence development. The usage of smartphones becomes addictive, and smartphones in particular prevent thinking in space and time and affect the development of the brain, attention, and learning. A generation growing with smartphones will have difficult to critically evaluate the use of artificial intelligence. This becomes a very big problem. And I would like to refer to the International Declaration on Human Rights of Children in the Digital Age, where it says clearly that the children have the right to be from intentionally addictive devices, platforms, applications, the right to be free from harmful exposure to radiation, and the right to be free from commercial exploitation. Today, I'm afraid these three fundamental rights are at least at stake and are already being violated. So we have to do something. We have to eliminate those factors which could affect our children's development and happiness via using good practices. First of all, to eliminate and reduce the radiation, we should use devices in schools, in pediatric wards, and home on wired connections or flight mode. We have to keep distance from devices as radiation is inversely proportional to the square. We have to teach our children to do so. A reduction in screen time with wireless devices, of course, means reduction also in EMF exposure. In relation to the impact of devices, we have to carefully selected application devices, and you have to set limits in relation to content, the space where those devices are used, and boundaries. We have in the parallel to enhance, to provide our children healthier alternative. Digital education must be in balance with the classic one, and child must use devices when there is a real proof of education benefit, as clearly stated in PISA studies and UNESCO 2024. Government agencies of education should consider the recent findings of brain research already mentioned by Dr. Paley as well, the psychology, etc., into consideration when we plan to implement digital education. Children's rights must be respected, and some advice comes from Kessinger in Germany that children need digital-free zones for up at least well in elementary school to enable to make the learning experience that suit their cognitive development. Digital media may be introduced gradually as auxiliary method. Pupils have to know both their potential benefits and their risks. Media maturity and literacy is a crucial element of media competency, so that they may actively use digital media rather than being stressed or manipulated by them. And we have the decision of the Australian government already mentioned by Dr. Pillai in relation to the prohibition of the social media. And I would like just to raise your attention to the science which is behind this decision. First of all, by the age of 10, child starts seeking approval and attention from the others. During adolescence, the brain's reward system undergoes critical changes. The happy hormones, already mentioned oxytocin and dopamine, increase in the ventral striatum, a region of the brain linked to social rewards. So a great issue of social media addiction is the reward system. Social media overstimulates adolescent brain reward system, creating a cycle of instant gratification, which conditions the brain to seek constant stimulation, impairing impulse control and decision-making skills. Heavy social media use is strongly linked to anxiety, depression, and loneliness. It's not a matter of prohibiting things, but also to provide alternatives to the kids. So outdoor activities like hiking and team sport reduce stress. Creative pursuits like art, music, and crafting enhance focus and emotional expression. Volunteering fosters empathy and teamwork. Chess and puzzle develop critical thinking and patience. Physical practices, yoga and dance, improve stability and sleep. And where we should concentrate our efforts. To our opinions, we should concentrate at homes and school, because infants to adolescents, according to their age, spend between 60 and 90% of their time in those two places. And in those two places, reduction of exposure, rational use of devices, and risk is mostly dependent only on parents and teacher attitudes. And since exposure and effects are cumulative, these changes into 60 to 90% of their time could greatly reduce the child's risk. So parents must utilize sound information on the risk of digital technology so they can set appropriate limits. Most important, have to create a family culture, because the children, they are not obeying in what we are saying to them, but they follow what we are doing. So create a family culture and a family media plan, which is proposed, and you can find this on the web by American Pediatric Association. Parents must empower their children to build self-regulation skill. It's very important. If you start from the very early, from the preschoolers, then it is easily to create gradually a nice self-regulation system. At school, exposure must be reduced by using balanced digital and classical education. Science-based education and awareness ranges are very important in our effort. This is the way we are working in our national committee, by creating a lot of material. We educate doctors, pediatricians, we educate teachers, especially we start a very nice program with preschooler teacher, because there is the most important stage where once the child the child can develop this self-regulation system. These are kinds of videos that we prepare, all available for you, all with English subtitles, and you are free to make a translation in your own language. I am very proud of this video, which is for preschoolers up to 8 years old child. And this has been already approved by the Ministry of Education as a learning material for the children. This is our recent guide on safe use of technology, few examples, and a guide on safe internet connection. You can all find this on our website. So in conclusion, the puzzle is really very complicated, and we don't have yet enough research on the interaction of the two sides of the coin. Exposure to EMF is ubiquitous, is growing exponentially. There is no yet absolute proof of all harm, but there is strong evidence of biological effects. The positive and negative implications of growing up as a digital native in a society in which media use begin very early remain largely unknown. But brain research findings from the past half-century provide comprehensive evidence for potential damage on the brain because of misuse of digital technology. The uncontrolled digital transformation of our society could cause severe and also irreversible cognitive damage to the young generation. The safety of application and devices is uncertain. Emerging devices and application without pre-market testing. And one thing which is undisputable is the children's vulnerability. But legislation and policy does not protect our children from biological effects or the risk of devices and applications. The evidence is sufficient, ladies and gentlemen, to take precautionary policies. Politicians should consider sound scientific evidence of potential risk for taking preventive actions and not waiting for the absolute proof. The whole society, parents, teachers, doctors, must understand the risk, be aware of good practices, and take action to protect and support children so that they are going to benefit from technology in a safe way. And we as public health science must support science-based precautionary action. We have to provide politicians and society concrete information distilled out from our holistic and socially responsible science, respecting and integrated the public health principles of precaution and prevention. Our children is the most precious legacy because, as our Nobel Prize poet Yanis Ritsos said, the child is simple life and nothing else. Thank you very much for your kind attention.